Hey, everybody. So, I wanted to talk to you guys about some possible discussion topics for 1984. Now, these are the topics that you have to choose from for doing your research. And I'm giving these to you now because as you're reading this book, you're going to need to be pulling quotes from this book for your research paper. Well, I don't want you to have to read the entire book and then go and figure out what research paper topic you want to write about and then try to go back and try to find, oh, wait, where was that quote again? That just doesn't make any sense. So instead, I'm going to give you the research paper topics first. That way you can look at the topics, listen to this video, decide which one sounds like the most interesting topic for you to write. And then as you're reading the book, you can be pulling quotes from the book that explain that particular topic better. Okay, so I'm going to try to help you out with some of these, kind of help you organize your thoughts and things like that. So anyway, here we go. So you have 10 topics to choose from, just like with all three books. And again, remember that just like Life of Pi, 1984 is a book of fiction. So just like Life of Pi, these topics are also going to be focused more on the literary aspect of the writing. Okay, so let's take a look. This critic says, in 1984, Orwell depicts a society which, strictly speaking, can never exist because its rulers have the kind of powers traditionally attributed to demons. The closed immobility of the society depends, that is, on its rulers having access to resources which human beings, however wicked and however ordinarily powerful, cannot command. It has successfully recreated the idea of hell and endowed it with an immediacy and significance which Milton and Dante can no longer command. Okay, so in this particular topic, it's a long-winded quote, but what I'm asking you to do is think about what are some literary interpretations of hell. And for this, you may want to do a little bit of research, like what do some other authors think of hell, or how does this quote mentions Milton and Dante. So maybe look them up and see what they say about hell. What is hell? And how is it defined? Maybe even look at the Bible or whatever. And compare and contrast those versions of hell, those interpretations of hell, with the idea of hell as presented in 1984. Okay, that one's a little bit philosophical, a little bit outside the box, maybe not your cup of tea. That's okay. But in that particular assignment, that particular paper, you could do this paragraph about this book's version of hell, this paragraph about this book's version of hell, this book's version of hell, and so on and so forth. And then you can intersplice 1984 and compare and contrast 1984 in each one of those versions. So this paragraph's all about Dante's versions of hell. Compare and contrast with 1984, so on and so forth. Okay, so the second topic is man versus society, or man versus government. So talk to me about that conflict. In what way is Winston against society? In what ways is he against the government? And how does he go through that journey of being compliant in what's going on and his life to all of a sudden, I hate the government, I hate Big Brother, I hate society? How does he get there? Walk me through that progression. What happens as he slowly starts to descend? Because it wasn't just a one morning he woke up and hated it. It was a slow progression. And the book does a really good job of kind of giving you backstory sprinkled throughout, where we get glimpses of him as a younger man and how this has always kind of been there underneath the surface. So talk to me about that. Okay, this next one, I give you another quote. So basically, read this quote and then discuss the society of 1984. So talk to me about, how does the government in 1984 keep control of its people? How does it function? What do they do? What is his job? What is Winston's job? Why does that matter? Why is that important? What's the day in the life of a person living in this world like? Okay. So the next one is the idea of satire. We talked about satire at the end of last semester. So now I want you to talk to me about the satirical elements of this book. Now, this book isn't funny per se, because it's really not. But what makes it satirical is this is George Orwell. Now, remember, George Orwell, the author of this book, he wrote this shortly after World War II, where he saw firsthand, as a British gentleman, he saw firsthand what Nazism was like. You know, that the Nazis tried very hard to take over England. And so he saw this firsthand. And it had a deep, deep, profound impact on him. So my question to you in this is, what is he critiquing about society? What is he critiquing about government in this book? What warnings is he giving us, the reader, about totalitarian regimes and how we could get there? You know, there's a whole section in this book where Winston reads from a manifesto. And it seems dry and it seems boring or whatever, but it's really important because this is the author saying, this is how you get there. This is how you go from where we are now to where this book is taking place. Be warned. So talk to me about those warning signs. Okay. And then the second part of that is, does this satire still hold up today? In other words, are we in danger of getting to this point? Are his predictions coming true? The next one, liberals, conservatives, all these different groups have each claimed 1984 as kind of their mouthpiece for why they believe what they believe. Marxists use it as a warning sign of, these are the evils of capitalism, and this is why you need to avoid capitalism. Capitalists have used this as a warning sign of, these are the evils of socialism, and this is why you need to avoid socialism. Liberals have used it, conservatives have used it, feminists have used it. Everybody seems to love using this book as a warning sign of, if you don't follow our beliefs, this is what's going to happen to you. So in this category, or in this topic, I want you to pick about 3 or so of these groups, and it doesn't have to be these, it could be other groups, but pick 3 groups and explain how they might use this book as their mouthpiece for their agenda. In order to do that, you're going to need to understand their agenda. So what is the liberal agenda? What is the conservative agenda? What is the Marxist agenda, the feminist agenda, so on and so forth? You may have to do a little bit of digging, a little bit of research to figure out what that agenda is so that you can talk about how this book does or doesn't work as a mouthpiece for that. The next topic is talking about freedom. What freedoms does Winston have? What freedoms does he not have? How are they similar or different to the freedoms that we have? How are those freedoms important? For example, one of the big freedoms in this book that is mentioned over and over again is the freedom of speech. Why is the freedom of speech important? Why was it so important for this government to take it away from him and the other people in this book? Why did that matter? So talk to me about different freedoms. You could organize your paper where you have freedom of speech in one paragraph, freedom of religion in another paragraph, or whatever, okay? But talk about the idea of freedoms. Okay, the next one is the use of physical and psychological control. How does Big Brother control its citizens physically? How does it control them psychologically? How does it manipulate its residents? So you could have half of your paper talk about the physical manipulation, half of your paper talk about the psychological manipulation. There's tons of evidence all throughout this book to demonstrate those things. And you could have a section in your paper where you compare these manipulations to real world manipulations. how are we as American citizens being manipulated physically? How are we being manipulated psychologically? So personally, I think this is one of the most interesting topics on this entire list. If I were to do this, this is the one I would choose. I don't want to say that just to influence you. Personally, I find that interesting. But you do you. Okay. The next topic is the idea of censorship, which, by the way, is a hot button issue these days. So if you're going to pair this one, if you're going to look at this one and pair it with real world examples, there's a lot to choose from right now. You know, think about Trump and Twitter and Facebook and all of that stuff that's going on right now. But the idea of censorship and the control of language to control a society. Think about Glasnost when the Nazis burned all of these books. Think about when the library, I believe it was the Library of Alexandria, was burned down. What knowledge might have been lost in these burnings? Why do people burn books? Why do people try to censor what people say? Why is that important? Think about how people can gain power through the control of information. So that might be an interesting topic to write about. Certainly could have a lot of real world examples today. And then the last one, both Winston and Julia recognize the seriousness of their predicament, yet neither person succumbed to hopelessness until towards the end. So I want you to write in this topic about the idea of hope and how powerful hope can be. And I've given you a couple of other readings to kind of help you talk about hope and how powerful hope can be. You could talk about it from a religious standpoint. You could talk about it from a motivational standpoint. You could talk about it from a biological standpoint about how hope can actually, keep our brain active and functioning at peak performance and so on and so forth. So you could split your paper up and talk about all three, whatever. So anyway, I do love this book, and I love that this book plays so nicely with real world examples. I think of all the fictional books that I could have chosen to give you for choice reading, this one has a lot of real world application. So there's a lot of real world research that you could throw in there with your scholarly critics. So you have the choice of, using, you have the book as your primary source, you have scholarly critics as your ethos, your credibility. Then you also have real world examples that you can use for this book to give further credence to what you're saying. So a lot of great stuff here. Love it. So choose one and then start thinking about quotes, or start pulling quotes as you read. Maybe jot them down on your reading guide or whatever, but start pulling quotes as you're reading to fit one of these topics. Okay?